Regarding blood sugar, there's some statistic I read that like 100 million Americans have either diabetes or prediabetes. So the question is, if someone sticks to a diet of whole beans and whole grains with potatoes and squashes, is there a concern that if you eat too much of those, that could raise your blood sugar too much? Do you need to eat it with a lot of vegetables? Do you have to moderate the amount? Do you have any thought about making sure that your blood sugar stays in an appropriate level if you're on a diet of beans and grains and potatoes and squashes? We start with Dr. McDougall and Dr. Klaper, then Dr. Espinosa.
Well, I'm a real doctor. I really see patients. And a lot of the patients that I see have type 2 diabetes. Many of them have type 1.5 diabetes. Many of them have type 1 diabetes. And they worry about that. They worry about whether or not eating carbohydrates will raise their blood sugar. And it does right after you eat, but that's what's supposed to happen, is your blood sugar is supposed to go up after you eat. But in the long run, that's not a problem. 100% of type 2 diabetics are curable with a change to a healthy diet and associated weight loss. Type 1 diabetics, they require about 2/3 as much insulin when they switch from the fats to the sugars, to the carbohydrates. So, in the long run, you're looking at a cure if you pick the right kind of diet. Even in the short run, I'm not talking about just after a meal, but even in the short run over the next, say, few days or few weeks, your blood sugars are going to get much better, particularly if you're a type 2 diabetic. Even a type 1, like say, I typically drop the insulin in my type 1 diabetic patients to 2/3 of what they were taking. And then the journal Diabetic Cares in the year 2013, they showed that when you feed type 1 diabetics fat, oils, that you increase their insulin needs. It's the fats and oils that paralyze the insulin. It's not the sugars. As a matter of fact, a guy named Brunzell in 1972 published in the New England Journal of Medicine how he's from University of Washington. He showed how type 2 diabetics, when you increase their simple sugar from 45% of the calories, and this was simple sugar, this wasn't starch, to 85% of the calories, every aspect of their diabetes got better. Their insulin levels were less, their 24-hour blood sugars were less, the morning blood sugars were decreased. And what they concluded in this New England Journal of Medicine article by Brunzell is that sugar increases the sensitivity of insulin and makes it work better. So, again, people come to some incorrect conclusions. They haven't read the science. They don't really understand what's going on. And of course, the public is scared to death because of this misinformation. And by the way, I'm giving a lecture on Sunday on this particular issue on diabetes.
Could our tech team come in for a second? John, can you help Ms. Dr. McDougall? We are getting, again, a little breaking in his microphone. Are you able, I could hear it, but it was a little bit, are you able to help him at all?
Hey, Dr. McDougall, can you just maybe lower the gain on that?
All right. How's that?
Better.
Better? Okay. Yeah.
Okay. We good? Okay. Dr. Klaper?
Yeah, well, I agree tonight, I guess. Dr. McDougall, especially towards the end of his explanation, really, I think, hit the key concept. Type 2 diabetes is a disease of fat toxicity. The problem is not sugars. And Dr. Harvey Shirley in the 1920s showed this very graphically. He took a bunch of medical students, half of them he put on a high sugar diet, had them eat white bread and crystalline sugars, and it was a high sugar diet. And then did a glucose tolerance test on them. They're absolutely normal. It did not interfere with their ability to handle sugars. But then he gave the other group of med students a high fat diet. They were drinking olive oil, eating butter, just a huge amount of fat. They all went diabetic in their glucose tolerance curves. When they went back to a high carbohydrate diet, the glucose intolerance went away immediately. It was completely reversible, but it was just a graphic demonstration that it's the fat clogging up the insulin receptors. And it's from the high-fat diet that people are eating bacon and eggs for breakfast, cheeseburgers for lunch, chicken for dinner. It's a high-fat diet, and they're walking around with clogged up insulin receptors. So when they eat some carbohydrates, oh, blood sugar goes up, and they, oh, avoid those sugars. But it's really the fat that's clogging up the insulin receptors. The high sugars, that's the tail of the dog. That's the effect. That's not the cause. And as Dr. McDougall said, when we eat a high carbohydrate diet, our insulin works better. The fella Andrew Taylor down in Australia ate potatoes for a year. And he wound up, he lost weight, got trim, and he had great glucose tolerance after eating potatoes constantly for a year. So, so eating a diet high in whole carbohydrates, not colas and Oreos, whole carbohydrates should not put you in danger of diabetes for sure. And should you be walking on high blood insulins all day? I don't think you should be a grazer just eating carbohydrates all day, because you're walking around with high insulin levels all day. As Dr. Espinosa says, that may be pro everything, inflammatory, carcinogenic, etc. So eat 3 honest meals a day, 2 honest meals, 1 honest meal a day is just fine, actually. But don't be afraid of carbohydrates in their whole form, the rice and potatoes. That's what we were meant to eat. We are starchivores. The ancient Paleolithic folks did not eat mammoth meat for their calorie supply. The women spent all day digging up roots and tubers and bringing back starches. And we were starchivores then, we're starchivores now. So, so the rice and potatoes don't pose a problem.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem, sorry, I'm at risk of being repetitive. The biggest problem is overconsumption of food. I think that's the biggest problem we face of all macronutrients. We don't need that much food, and a lot of that is dependent on how much energy you expel. But I'm a pretty active guy, and I do intermittent fasting 16, 20 hours a day sometimes. And I, nothing, there's no problems. So I think that, I find it difficult to believe that a high whole food starch diet like sweet potato and things like that. First of all, I don't think many people can eat too much of those kind of foods. You get, that is so nutrient dense that you get filled, and so you don't eat that much. So I don't think it's necessary. I don't think most people would do it or can do it. And I think the main thing is let's cut back in all the eating that we do, and less practice either fasting, which is a great thing, or intermittent fasting, which is a really good thing.